Right after that brutal car crash, I slapped my Colonel wife with divorce papers. Stepping out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, she looked at me, totally clueless. Is it just because I saved Alex first during the wreck and left you behind? I gave her a calm nod, and panic instantly flooded her face. It was early spring in Seattle, and the biting wind sent a lingering chill through my bones as I walked away. I gripped the dark red divorce certificate tightly in my hand. Its rough texture rubbing against my fingertips perfectly mirrored how my self-esteem had been ground into dust over the past 3 years of this miserable marriage. Suddenly, my stomach violently twisted, followed by a sickening dull ache in my chest. It felt like my broken ribs were practically screaming. Exactly 48 hours had passed since that nightmare of a crash, and I hadn't even seen a doctor. I just popped 2 cheap painkillers from the pharmacy. Why? Because at the scene of that horrific wreckage, my own wife, Colonel Isabella Harper, hadn't even spared me a single glance. Kane, let's talk. Her freezing voice pierced my back. I stopped dead in my tracks and turned around. Isabella stood there in her perfectly pressed dark green military uniform, making her look incredibly striking yet as cold and utterly untouchable as a flawless marble statue. Her piercing gaze was always so intense, like she could instantly see right through the lies of any rule breaker. Yet she was completely blind to the thick bandages strapped beneath my shirt, which were already dripping with fresh blood. The papers are signed, so what the hell is left to discuss? I stared back at her with zero emotion. Isabella gave a slight frown, flashing that signature condescending look of hers. My deadpan, emotionless tone clearly rubbed her the wrong way. In her twisted mind, I, Kane Miller, was supposed to be the perfect little house husband, always meek, gentle, and endlessly patient. Are you seriously still throwing a tantrum? She took half a step toward me, her voice dripping with sheer exhaustion and annoyance. Just because I pulled Alex out of the wreck first and left you there? I stared at her flawlessly beautiful face and suddenly felt like I was looking at a total stranger. I just nodded, keeping my voice dead quiet. Yeah. Isabella completely froze. She clearly never expected me to just drop the truth bombs so bluntly. In her little fantasy world, I was supposed to be begging for her attention or crying my eyes out in agony. Not standing here, treating this like yesterday's trash. Kane, act like an adult for once. She let out this massive sigh, acting like she had just solved a childish puzzle, and shifted right back into her annoying lecturing tone. Things were spiraling out of control back there. Alex's car was literally teetering on the edge of the guardrail, and he suffers from severe PTSD. A sheer drop to the ocean was right below him. If I didn't drag him out immediately, his mind would have completely shattered. And you just bumped into the airbag. Aside from a few tiny scratches, you were perfectly fine to walk it off. You're a grown man, can't you stop being so damn petty? I dropped my gaze to the cracked pavement beneath my boots, still slick with puddles from last night's heavy rain. Her twisted version of me walking it off completely ignored the fact that the second that massive truck plowed into us, I violently cranked the steering wheel, deliberately throwing my own driver's seat into the direct line of impact. Amid the deafening, bone-crushing crunch of twisted metal, I burned through my very last ounce of consciousness to rip off my seatbelt, dragging my broken body out of the wreckage just to make sure she was safe. But when I finally reached her, covered in my own blood and barely able to stand, my so-called hero of a colonel was already cradling a perfectly fine Alex in her arms. She was whispering all these sweet, comforting words to him, without even throwing a spare glance my way. Petty. I echoed the word, a bitter, self-mocking smirk creeping across my face. You know, Isabella, that's actually the nicest compliment you've given me in 3 entire years. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Her eyes turned into absolute ice. Kane, drop the sarcastic attitude. Look, I get that you're hurt, but Alex just flew back from overseas and he doesn't have anyone else in Seattle. He's an old comrade. So it's only natural for me to look out for him a little extra. As for this ridiculous divorce stunt, I want you to cool off for a few days. Then we are going right back to normal. The military base falls apart without your help. My dad needs his medication sorted, and you're the only one who handles the household chores. You're simply the best at doing all the grunt work." I stared at her, utterly disgusted, like I was studying some alien parasite. I honestly had no idea until this exact moment, so, in her cold, calculating eyes, my absolute only worth as her husband was being a glorified maid and an unpaid nurse for her dad. Hard pass. I turned my back on her for good, facing the scattered crowd loitering around the Civil Affairs Bureau Plaza. "Isabella, that life-saving debt your old man owed me 3 years ago, I've officially paid it back in blood and sweat. From this second forward, I don't owe you a damn thing, and I sure as hell don't owe the Harper family a single drop more." "Kane, you freeze right there." Isabella's voice violently spiked, practically shaking with the absolute fury of a dictator being defied. Right at that exact second, a sleek silver Porsche slammed its brakes at the bureau's entrance, tires squealing like a banshee. The driver's door popped open, and out stepped Alex, clutching a massive, flashy bouquet of blood-red roses. He was decked out in a flawless, ultra-expensive tailored suit, with every single hair perfectly glued into place. A faint, almost totally invisible smirk of pure cockiness danced across his slightly feminine face. "Isabella, babe, is all the boring paperwork finally finished?" Alex practically jogged over, effortlessly sliding right next to Isabella like he was the real husband all along. The moment his slimy eyes locked onto the divorce certificate trapped in my fist, a vicious flash of pure victory briefly lit up his face. "Oh, Kane, my man, I am just so incredibly heartbroken that my little situation drove such a massive wedge between you and Isabella," Alex whined, faking a painfully sincere tone. Yet, Alex's hand rested way too comfortably on Isabella's shoulder. "Isabella was just doing her duty," he said smoothly. "After all, she's a soldier. Saving lives is her true calling. And you? How could you push her to a divorce over something so trivial? A grown man throwing tantrums like that won't last a second out in the real world." Isabella didn't brush his hand away. She just stared at me with ice in her eyes, waiting for me to apologize to Alex or maybe even beg for her forgiveness. I kept my mouth shut, just quietly watching the two of them. The sharp pain in my chest was getting worse by the second. I knew what it meant, internal bleeding. My vision started to blur, but I kept my back totally straight. For 3 years, I swallowed my pride. For 3 long years, I chained myself down, forcing the once terrifying Kane Miller, the man who dominated the business world and made endless rivals shake with fear, into the pathetic shell of an ordinary house husband. All because General Harper gripped my hand on his deathbed and whispered, "Kane, Isabella is a proud woman. Please, take care of her for me." Well, now I could finally toss that dying wish straight into the trash. "Kane, Alex is talking to you. Have you completely lost your manners?" Isabella's frown deepened when she saw I wasn't answering. I laughed. It was the very first time in 3 years I'd laughed so freely and so damn coldly. Manners are reserved for people, not for animals. "Who the hell are you calling an animal?" Alex's face instantly flashed a bright, furious red. He marched forward, dropping his voice to a venomous growl right in my ear. "Kane, you are nothing but a stray dog getting kicked to the curb with absolutely nothing. Without the Harper family, you couldn't even afford a sip of tap water in Seattle. Be smart. Get lost right now, or I will personally make sure you disappear from this city." I turned my head just a fraction, meeting his toxic stare head on. "Is that so?" I replied softly. My voice was terrifyingly calm. "Then, let's see exactly who disappears first." Isabella sensed the heavy tension between us. She immediately yanked Alex back and glared at me with absolute disgust. "Kane, you have disappointed me so much. I thought you were just mediocre, but I never expected you to be this unhinged and painfully narrow-minded. Alex's company is literally about to partner with the world-renowned Thunder Group. His future is something a loser like you who only knows how to buy groceries and cook meals could never even dream of. Get out. Leave before I decide to arrest you for interfering with a public official's work. I didn't even spare her a second glance. I just turned around and walked toward the intersection outside the Civil Affairs Bureau. Every single step felt like roaring fire in my lungs. Isabella stood on the steps, watching my lonely, battered figure walking away. For some inexplicable reason, her chest suddenly tightened. For 3 years, no matter how insanely late she came home, that man would always leave a warm light on and serve her a steaming bowl of hot soup. But right now, that same man was walking away with absolute, chilling resolve, as if he was cutting away every last trace of the past 3 years. Isabella, don't even mind him. Guys like that only know how to take advantage of your soft heart, Alex coaxed, gently holding her hand, his face dripping with fake tenderness. Come on, I've already booked your absolute favorite French restaurant to celebrate your brand new single life. Isabella took a shaky, deep breath, forcing down the weird sense of panic creeping into her heart. All right, let's go. But just as they reached for the car doors, a heavy, deafening roar erupted from the intersection just down the street. That was no ordinary sports car. It was the beast-like rumbling growl of a top-tier armored military engine. As a military colonel, Isabella's combat instincts made her snap her head around instantly. What she saw was a massive convoy of jet-black vehicles rolling across the square with a suffocating, domineering presence. Leading the pack were 3 heavy-duty black Humvees, tightly flanking a breathtaking, custom-built Rolls-Royce Phantom right in the center. The silver spirit of ecstasy ornament on its hood flashed with a cold, ruthless gleam under the afternoon sun. The city of Seattle had never witnessed a motorcade of this terrifying caliber. The massive convoy slowly crawled to a halt by the curb, completely boxing in Alex's little Porsche. Alex opened his mouth, fully ready to throw a massive temper tantrum. But the second his eyes locked onto the black and gold government license plate on that Rolls-Royce, he froze solid. Cold sweat instantly poured down his spine. It was the highest-ranking emblem of a top-tier dignitary from the Department of Defense. As Isabella watched in absolute stunned silence, the heavy door of the Rolls-Royce finally swung open. An impeccably dressed elderly man stepped out in a sharp tailcoat. His hair was silver, but his entire aura was razor-sharp and intensely focused. He moved with brisk, practiced purpose, completely ignoring the shocked stares of everyone around him. He walked straight toward the slightly disheveled man standing quietly by the side of the road. He walked straight toward the exact same man Isabella had just shoved away and cruelly insulted for being a useless, mediocre burden. Kane Miller. The old butler stopped exactly 3 steps in front of me. Then, under the crowd's utterly shocked, bug-eyed stares, he bowed deeply, his back perfectly parallel to the concrete. "Master, your servant has arrived far too late. Please forgive me." His voice wasn't loud at all, yet it echoed like an explosive clap of thunder across the dead silent square. At that exact moment, my slightly hunched back slowly, finally straightened up. The dull, indifferent look in my eyes vanished, replaced by something incredibly dark, profound, and viciously sharp, like an unsheathed blade, instantly slicing away every last trace of my former gentle self. I took the heavy black trench coat the old man offered and casually draped it over my shoulders, perfectly hiding the blood-stained shirt underneath. "Alfred," I asked calmly, "did you bring the items?" My voice was no longer gentle, instead carrying the heavy, absolute authority of a man long accustomed to command. "I have them. The presidential seal of the Seattle branch of the Thor Group, as well as the official mandate to unfreeze every single asset under your name." The elderly man respectfully handed over a dark golden ring. I took it in silence, slowly sliding it onto the middle finger of my left hand. Turning my head, I shot an ice-cold glare at Isabella and Alex, who were standing on the steps about 30 feet away. In that exact second, Isabella felt as if an invisible hand had wrapped around her throat, completely suffocating her breath. It was a terrifying look she had never seen from me before. There was no warmth, no resentment, only a dead, chilling indifference, like a god looking down at mere ants. "Isabella, is that really Kane?" Alex's voice shook violently, the red rose in his hand slipping from his grasp to be scattered by the biting wind. Isabella didn't even answer. She just watched in stunned silence as I stepped into the Rolls-Royce, and the massive black motorcade rolled away like a receding tide. Only when the fleet of cars had completely vanished from sight did she realize her own hands and feet had turned numb like ice. "Kane, just who exactly are you?" she murmured breathlessly to herself. Meanwhile, inside the smoothly gliding Rolls-Royce, I leaned back heavily against the premium leather seat. My face so pale it was almost completely translucent. "Young master, your complexion doesn't look right at all." Alfred had spotted the terrifying anomaly through the rearview mirror, his voice instantly spiking with panic. "Are you still hurt from that car accident the other day?" Isabella had honestly thought it was just a minor scratch. I slowly closed my eyes, a thin trickle of dark blood finally escaping the corner of my mouth. "Take me to St. Mary's Hospital," I rasped quietly, "and inform Victoria Gray that every last cent of funding to the Harper family is to be cut off immediately. Also, do a deep dive on Alex." "Right away, sir." Outside the tinted car window, the dazzling city lights of Seattle rushed past in a blur. I knew this ultimate counterattack to reclaim my dignity and power had only just begun. These past 3 years of playing the weakling weren't cowardice. They were a necessary restraint, a way to quietly hoard enough strength to crush absolutely everything in my path. Now, the exiled prince had finally returned. Every single person who owed me, humiliated me, and betrayed me was going to pay dearly. I would collect every last debt with my own 2 hands. Meanwhile, at the Seattle Military Base Command Center, the massive hall was dimly lit, illuminated only by dozens of giant electronic screens flashing a cold, eerie blue light. Isabella stood frozen in front of the main console. Her deep green military uniform looked especially sharp and severe under the monitor's pale, ghostly glow. Her face was a wreck, dreadfully pale. Ever since that tense confrontation outside the Civil Affairs office, the shocking image of me stepping into that Rolls-Royce had been looping relentlessly in her head. That terrifying sense of unfamiliarity felt exactly like a thin steel wire wrapping tightly around her heart and pulling with a dull, suffocating ache. "Colonel Harper, we've successfully retrieved the high-definition road surveillance footage from the day of the accident, along with the cloud backup data from the vehicle's dashcam." The young technician cautiously broke the dead, heavy silence in the room. Isabella took a deep, shaky breath, her voice trembling slightly. "Play it." The giant screen flickered, instantly rewinding the scene to that chaotic, rainy night 48 hours ago. In the video, I was driving the beat-up domestic SUV, taking Isabella home from a long shift. The rain was coming down in sheets, heavily blurring the windshield. Isabella was sitting completely checked out in the passenger seat, with her head bowed down, eagerly texting Alex. She was completely blind to the massive truck wildly swerving and speeding recklessly towards the side intersection. At the exact fraction of a second before the truck was going to violently T-bone the SUV, my reaction on screen was terrifyingly fast. Without a single second of hesitation, I cranked the steering wheel hard to the left, spinning it a full 1.5 turns. Isabella's pupils shrank to pinpricks. As a seasoned military officer, she knew exactly what that desperate maneuver meant. Staring down an utterly unavoidable, fatal collision, the driver had deliberately chosen to sacrifice his own side of the car. I had purposely exposed myself, swinging the absolute strongest part of the frame to take the brutal hit, protecting the passenger at all costs. Bang! The deafening, explosive crunch of metal sent sickening chills straight down her spine, echoing horribly through the speakers. The SUV's driver's side crumpled instantly like a tin can, and a massive chunk of shattered windshield exploded inward like countless bullets. In the raw footage, my head slammed brutally against the side airbag, and thick blood immediately poured down my face like a broken dam, staining my crisp white shirt completely crimson. Isabella's trembling fingers dug so hard into the marble console that her fingernails turned completely blue. The surveillance tape kept running mercilessly. She watched in absolute horror as I lay totally unconscious for a few agonizing seconds before violently prying open the mangled car door. I dragged myself out, immediately collapsing into the muddy street. My right arm hung at a gruesome, unnatural angle, clearly shattered, and yet, seemingly completely numb to the excruciating pain, I dragged myself across the pavement, crawling step by bloody step toward the passenger side, desperately trying to reach her unconscious body. But right at that very moment, Alex's flashy silver Porsche drifted into the camera's frame. Alex practically screamed for his car to stop, sprinting over like a hero to scoop up Isabella right as she finally regained consciousness. The very next sequence was burned into Isabella's memory forever. She remembered waking up in that exact second, completely terrified and disoriented, while Alex, who brazenly claimed he had nearly driven his own car off a cliff just to save her, held her tightly against his chest. All the while, I was standing just a few feet away in the freezing rain, swallowed by the shadows, completely covered in blood. On the glowing monitor, Isabella watched her past self aggressively shove me away as I tried to limp closer, uttering something with unmistakable disgust. Now, with the surveillance audio finally enhanced, she could hear exactly what she had hissed at him in that moment. "Kane, stop getting in my way. Go check on Alex's car right now. If anything happens to him, could a loser like you even afford to pay for it?" Right there on the surveillance footage, I completely froze. The hand I had reached out to check her wounds began to tremble violently in midair. Then I slowly pulled it back, slipping it silently into my blood-stained pocket. I didn't say another word. I just stood there quietly in the background, like a complete outsider, watching my own wife desperately embrace another man. "Colonel Harper, should we keep watching?" the technician whispered, too terrified to even glance up at Isabella's devastated expression. "Turn it off," she snapped. Isabella abruptly turned on her heel and stormed right out of the monitoring room, though her footsteps were visibly shaking. For 3 whole years, she honestly believed I was just some ordinary guy, obedient, spineless, and perfectly content, mooching off the Harper family's comfortable lifestyle. She practically saw me as weak. So, the second that wealthy, witty, and charming Alex strutted into the picture, her heart naturally drifted right over to him. She figured that on the day of the horrific accident, I had just gotten insanely lucky to walk away without a scratch. But the brutal truth was, I had risked my own life to pull her from the wreckage, and my only reward was a vicious slap to the face. "Kane, just how much have you been hiding from me?" Isabella floored the gas pedal, speeding blindly towards St. Mary's private hospital. All she wanted right now was to track me down, whether to demand answers or desperately beg for forgiveness. St. Mary's private hospital wasn't just any clinic. It was the absolute top-tier medical facility in all of Seattle. Rooms here cost an absolute fortune per day. Every single nurse was trained in high society etiquette, and only the ultra-wealthy or insanely powerful could even walk through the doors. The moment Isabella rushed into the VIP waiting area, a sharp, screeching voice pierced through the quiet hallway. "Kane, you ungrateful little parasite. Get out here right now. Did you honestly think I wouldn't find you just because you scurried off to hide in some fancy hospital? Where the hell did a bum like you get the cash for a place like this? Did you steal the Harper family property deed and pawn it behind our backs?" Isabella's heart completely sank. That unbearable screaming belonged to her mother, Mrs. Harper. Sure enough, there was Mrs. Harper, standing dead center at the VIP corridor entrance, clutching her expensive Hermes bag with her hands on her hips, throwing a massive public tantrum. Several security guards hovered nervously nearby, too intimidated by Mrs. Harper's rich, high society attitude to drag her out by force. "Mom, what on earth are you doing here?" Isabella sprinted forward and desperately grabbed her mother's arm to quiet her down. "Isabella, you're just in time." Mrs. Harper snatched her daughter's hand right back, her face twisted in pure rage. "That pathetic coward actually had the nerve to divorce you. Fine, good riddance, let him leave. But how dare he hide money from us? Just look at this place, St. Mary's. A single night in one of these rooms costs more than half a year of our grocery bills. He's been leeching off our family for 3 whole years. He couldn't even afford his own socks. So where exactly did he get this kind of cash? Mum, just stop it, please." Kane was seriously injured in that car wreck. Isabella tried to explain, but her voice came out shaky and completely hollow. "Injured? "Oh, please, I bet he's faking the whole thing," Mrs. Harper sneered with disgust. "He's just putting on a show to extort a massive payout from the Harper family." "Well, I'm not having it. Today, I am going to make that little rat cough up every last dime and get on his knees to apologize to Alex. Alex told me everything. If Kane hadn't violently jerked the steering wheel that day, Alex's car never would have spun out of control. Just as Mrs. Harper geared up to charge straight down the hospital ward corridor again, an icy, razor-sharp female voice echoed from around the corner. "Mrs. Harper, since you seem to be so incredibly passionate about money, our legal department actually has quite a few outstanding bills we'd like you to review." Isabella immediately looked up. A stunning woman in a sleek dark grey power suit and gold-rimmed glasses was striding slowly toward them. Flanking her were 8 massive suited bodyguards wearing dark sunglasses, every synchronized step they took radiating an absolutely terrifying, overwhelming aura. That powerhouse was none other than Victoria Gray, the executive chief of the Thor Group's Seattle branch and the very first sharp blade I was pulling out for my grand return. "And who the hell are you? What gives you the right to interrupt me?" Mrs. Harper, far too used to bullying people around in her own home, glared at Victoria with absolute disdain. "I am Kane's mother-in-law. I'm simply disciplining my deadbeat son-in-law. So who do you think you are to step in?" Victoria halted exactly 3 steps away from the screeching woman, her red lips slowly curling into a chilling, mocking smirk. "First of all, Mr. Kane has already completely dissolved his marital ties with Miss Isabella. From a legal standpoint, you no longer have any connection to Mr. Kane whatsoever. Second of all," Victoria elegantly pushed up her glasses, her gaze instantly turning deadly sharp. "The $380 million in interest-free loans that Mr. Kane secretly funneled to save the Harper family business over the past 3 years, as well as the massive high-interest mob debts he quietly paid off to save you from those underground casinos, have all been meticulously documented down to the last penny. If you insist on continuing to throw a tantrum in this hospital, Mr. Kane's message is crystal clear. You will be legally forced to repay every single cent plus interest within 3 days. Mrs. Harper's arrogant face instantly drained of all color, turning deathly pale as her lips began to violently tremble. You're spouting utter nonsense. What financial support? That was all thanks to our Harper family's own brilliant business acumen." Victoria just let out a cold laugh, snatched a thick financial file from her assistant and slapped it violently against Mrs. Harper's chest with a resounding smack. "The Harper family business was already dead and bankrupt 3 years ago. You just didn't know who was keeping you alive. Listen here. If Mr. Kane hadn't pulled strings across the globe to forcibly bail out your company, your entire family would be begging under a highway bridge right now. And here is the proof. This covers the $1 million you blew in Las Vegas last year, which Mr. Kane quietly paid off so you wouldn't get your legs broken." Isabella froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had always convinced herself that the Harper family's massive success was purely due to her father's old connections and the ironclad protection of her own military rank. She never once realized that the very same man, the man who silently mopped her floors at home and chauffeured her to work every single day, was the invisible titan holding up the entire sky for the Harper family behind the scenes. You vile liar! You must be some cheap little homewrecker. Kane keeps you on the side just to spit on us," Mrs. Harper screeched, completely beside herself with blind rage. She raised her hand to slap Victoria across the face. Smack! A sharp crack echoed through the hallway. But it absolutely wasn't Victoria who had just taken the hit. Victoria effortlessly caught the old woman's wrist mid-air. With a lightning-fast backhand, she delivered a brutal, stinging slap right across Mrs. Harper's heavily powdered face. The massive blow sent Mrs. Harper literally spinning like a top before she collapsed into a heap on the floor. She clutched her stinging cheek, completely dazed and utterly speechless for a long, pathetic moment. "Mom!" Isabella cried out in panic, trying to rush forward to help, but she was instantly stopped by a solid wall of 2 massive bodyguards. "Colonel Harper, Strictly out of respect for your past as Mr. Kane's wife, I'll give you a free piece of advice. Victoria looked down at Isabella, her gaze as cold as absolute zero. Some people, once you lose them, become an abyss you can never ever return from. Mr. Kane's patience has completely run dry. If your wretched family dares to cross him again, I swear I won't hesitate for a single second to erase Harper Enterprises from the Seattle map forever. I want to see him. Let me see Kane right now. Isabella completely ignored her groaning mother, staring daggers at Victoria with a desperate, burning determination in her eyes. Victoria fell totally silent for a tense moment, subtly tapping her earpiece as if receiving a direct, top-secret order. Mr. Kane says only Colonel Harper is allowed to enter. As for this piece of trash, Victoria sneered, glancing down at Mrs. Harper, who was still dramatically whining on the hospital floor. Throw her out into the street. From now on, absolutely no members of the Harper family or their dogs are ever allowed inside St. Mary's Hospital. Isabella mindlessly followed Victoria toward the exclusive VIP ward, completely trapped in a dizzying daze. With every single step she took, the crushing weight on her heart only grew heavier. Heavily armed security personnel stood shoulder to shoulder at strict 5-meter intervals all down the long corridor. Not even the mayor of Seattle himself would ever warrant this kind of terrifying military display. When they finally reached the heavy oak doors of the presidential suite at the far end, Victoria stopped dead in her tracks. "Mr. Kane is waiting for you inside." Isabella nervously pushed the heavy door open. Seated with his back turned to her, framed perfectly by the massive floor-to-ceiling window, was me. I wore a loose, oversized hospital gown, casually draped with a badass black leather coat over my shoulders. My right arm was heavily encased in a thick plaster cast, while my uninjured left hand calmly flipped through a dense English business document. Surrounding me, like anxious students, were 6 or 7 elderly men in pristine white coats, standing nervously at attention in the center of the room. Isabella's jaw almost dropped when she instantly recognized one of them. It was Dr. Herman, the absolute legend and world-renowned surgical expert. This medical god, a luminary who had literally saved the lives of presidents and prime ministers from multiple countries, was now humbly bending over backward just to brief me on my chart. "Mr. Kane, sir, your internal bleeding is thankfully under control. However, the fractured rib penetrated dangerously deep into your lung, requiring strict and immediate bed rest. Additionally, sir, regarding your incredibly ambitious proposal for the new Global Medical Hub initiative, we have officially drafted a preliminary master plan," Dr. Herman said with the utmost bootlicking deference. I calmly snapped the file shut without even bothering to turn around. I merely gave a faint, dismissive wave of my good left hand. The medical experts instantly understood the silent command and scrambled to file out of the room one by one. As they quickly passed by Isabella, they didn't even spare her a single glance. The massive hospital suite immediately fell into a suffocating, deathly silence. Warm sunlight aggressively streamed through the towering floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow over my shoulders. Yet, not even the bright sun could dispel the absolutely suffocating, freezing chill radiating from my very core. "Take a seat, Colonel Harper," I finally said, my voice impossibly calm and hollow. There was no warm joy of a husband's reunion, no fiery thrill of a victor's revenge, just a cold, ruthless, and purely business-like indifference. Isabella shakily walked to my side, intensely studying my terribly pale yet sharply defined, handsome profile. She opened her mouth to speak, only to find her throat so dry she couldn't even muster a simple greeting. I'm so sorry. Does it still hurt?" She finally managed to painfully blurt out after an agonizingly long pause, uttering the most meaningless, pathetic question possible. I slowly turned my head for the first time, my deep, unfathomable eyes locking quietly and intensely onto her trembling frame. "Colonel Harper, tell me, have you bothered to check the intersection's surveillance footage yet?" Isabella shamefully lowered her head, completely unable to meet my piercing gaze. Yes, I saw it, Kane. Why didn't you just tell me? If you had only told me earlier that you were the one who secretly paid for all those massive funds. If you had just said you were only trying to save my life on the day of that horrific accident, what difference would it have possibly made? I bluntly interrupted her, my dark tone heavily laced with a bitter hint of self-mockery. Tell you, so I could sit back and watch you make a choice between me and that bastard Alex all over again? Please, Isabella, you were literally the top graduate of your class at the elite military academy. Your basic survival instincts and tactical judgment shouldn't be this unbelievably pathetic. Isabella's beautiful face instantly drained of color, turning a deathly sickening pale. But Alex, he swore he was just terrified of the crash. I could see his whole body trembling in fear. Oh, he really should be shaking. I let out a dark, freezing laugh. Using my good left hand, I smoothly picked up a sleek silver USB drive from the glass table and placed it gently, deliberately, right in front of Isabella's shaking hands. This contains the exact digital driving trajectory of Alex's precious Porsche right before the brutal collision. Colonel Harper, as a highly trained senior officer at the base, you can take this little toy back and study it very, very carefully. Ask yourself this. Why on earth would a luxury sports car driving perfectly straight suddenly and violently swerve right into a deadly steel guardrail when there were absolutely zero obstacles in its way? And that angle, it was calculated perfectly. It made it look like he was clinging to life on the brink of death, yet he never actually fell into the sea. Isabella's head snapped up. Wait, you mean he did it on purpose? Whether it was intentional or not, you can investigate that yourself, I replied coldly. But one thing is absolutely certain. The truck that caused our supposedly tragic accident? It belonged to a transportation company that received a massive overseas wire transfer just half a month ago. And the origin of that account? It perfectly matches the overseas base where your precious Alex was stationed. I slowly stood up. Though my body was still recovering, the towering, imposing presence of my 6'1" frame sent a visible shiver right through Isabella. I walked right up to her, slowly extended my left hand, and gently brushed the dust off the shoulder insignia on her uniform. Isabella, you have been sitting in this high position for way too long. You seem to have completely forgotten that the most unpredictable, venomous thing in this world is the human heart. You actually think Alex is your knight in shining armor? Yet in reality, he might just be a total madman looking to swallow the entire Harper family whole through you and permanently eliminate me in the process. Impossible. Alex wouldn't have the guts to do that, Isabella murmured to herself in denial. But even she could hear the pathetic, trembling waver in her own voice. Wouldn't have the guts, huh? You will get your harsh reality check at tomorrow's Seattle business banquet. I leaned back into my hospital chair, closing my eyes with chilling, detached indifference. You may leave now. I am tired. Isabella just stood there, staring blankly at this man who was once so intimately familiar to her. He was sitting right before her eyes, yet it felt like insurmountable mountains and vast oceans were standing between them. Kane, is there really no going back for us? Without even bothering to open my eyes, a ruthlessly cold smile played at the corners of my lips. Isabella, the exact moment we walked out of that civil affairs office with our divorce papers, we became strangers from entirely different worlds. Oh, and do be sure to pass a little message along to your mother for me. Tell her to stop throwing her pathetic tantrums at St. Mary's Hospital, because next time, Victoria might not settle for just giving her a slap across the face. Next time, it could very well be the entire Harper family's future at stake. Isabella practically stumbled out of the hospital ward, looking as if her very soul had been completely drained from her body. The afternoon sunlight glaring through the corridor windows was absolutely blinding, yet an icy, bone-deep chill washed over her entire body just as she was about to step into the elevator. Suddenly, her phone vibrated violently in her hand. It was Alex calling. Isabella, where are you? For tomorrow night's massive business gala, I went ahead and specially ordered you a gorgeous dress worth $1 million. We are going to stun absolutely everyone there. The mysterious Mr. Kane will be there too, and I am 100% confident we can finally seal this deal. Listening to Alex's overly excited, grating voice through the phone, Isabella suddenly felt sick to her stomach. She glanced down at the flash drive gripped tightly in her hand, and her wavering gaze gradually turned razor sharp. The ugly truth was being peeled away, layer by agonizing layer, and the perfect world she thought she knew was crumbling inch by inch under her now indifferent stare. Fast forward to the dazzling golden hall of the Seattle Peninsula Hotel. This place was the undeniable beating heart of power and wealth in Seattle. Every single inch of the polished marble floor seemed soaked in the intoxicating scent of old money. Tonight, an ultra-exclusive, high-profile charity business gala was being hosted right here. But anyone with half a working brain could clearly see that the so-called charity was nothing but a glittering fake facade. The real main event was the highly anticipated, legendary return of the ultimate big shot, Mr. Kane, the shadowy, all-powerful mastermind pulling the strings behind the Thor Group's Seattle division. And tonight, he would officially select his very first strategic partner in the entire city. High above the chaos, Isabella stood quietly on the second-floor circular corridor. Dressed sharply in a specialized VIP security uniform, her slender yet rigidly disciplined figure was perfectly accentuated by the heavy weapon belt strapped tightly around her waist. Acting as the head security chief for the evening, she professionally scanned the entire opulent venue below with sharp, hawkish eyes. Yet, despite her focus, her gaze involuntarily drifted over to the Harper family, who were pathetically huddled together in a corner of the first-floor lobby. Mr. Harper was forcing a broad, fake smile, desperately weaving his way through the wealthy guests. His submissive, embarrassingly servile demeanor stirred up a deeply inexplicable sense of sorrow and heavy unease in Isabella's chest. It was no secret that the Harpers had been facing some incredibly serious, near-fatal business troubles over these past few years. What had once been flawlessly maintained as a highly respectable facade, all thanks to my covert, behind-the-scenes financial support, was now rapidly unraveling. It was like a fragile veil being violently torn away the second I pulled my massive investments following our bitter divorce. Just a short distance away from that pathetic display, Alex was currently surrounded by a sycophantic group of young heirs from second-tier families. Dressed flashily in an outrageously expensive custom royal blue suit, he lazily swirled a glass of champagne, his punchable face practically radiating unearned confidence and arrogant pride. "Mr. Alex, when the legendary Mr. Kane finally comes out later tonight, you absolutely have to introduce us to him," one of the eager trust fund kids called out desperately. "Oh, sure, consider it done," Alex replied with sickening smug satisfaction. But as his slimy eyes glanced over the massive crowd, they hungrily fixed on Isabella up above. Then he impatiently scanned the grand room, looking like a caged animal desperately searching for an outlet to vent his hidden frustrations. Suddenly, a restless, buzzing commotion erupted right at the grand entrance of the hall. I confidently stepped inside, having finally changed out of my plain, boring hospital clothes into a breathtaking, custom-tailored, ink-black suit. The expensive fabric was impeccably tailored to my exact measurements, flawlessly outlining my cold, undeniably imposing figure. Even though my injured right hand still remained slightly stiff inside the silk sleeve, it didn't matter. The suffocating aura of pure, absolute authority that naturally emanated from deep within my bones, born of long, bloody years ruling at the very top of the food chain, was so overwhelming that it caused the seasoned doorman to physically freeze up and hesitate, entirely forgetting to even ask to check my VIP invitation. Completely ignoring the shocked, complex and whispering gazes erupting all around me, I walked straight toward the VIP lounge area of the hall. "Hey, wait a minute! Isn't this our pathetic former Harper family house husband, Kane Miller?" A harsh, obnoxiously loud voice suddenly rang out through the crowd. It was Alex. Accompanied by his little gang of rich lackeys, they aggressively closed in on me, looking exactly like a pack of rabid bloodhounds who had just caught a fresh scent. He looked me up and down, his lip curling into a nasty sneer. "Where did you even rent that suit? Must have cost you a fortune, huh?" "Kane, You seriously do not think you can just waltz back into high society just because you got dumped and scraped together enough for a decent pair of shoes, do you? Man, that entry ticket alone could have bought groceries for the Harper family for 3 whole years. Mr. Harper heard the commotion and stomped over. The moment he saw me, his face instantly turned pitch black. "Kane, what the hell are you doing here? Haven't you embarrassed my family enough already? Get out. Don't you dare ruin this for the VIPs arriving tonight." I just calmly stared back at the man I had called father for 3 years. Right now, his eyes were practically dripping with pure, undisguised disgust. "I am just here to take back what is mine," I said, my voice deadpan. "My things." "Are you kidding me? Every single penny in this house was earned by Isabella's blood, sweat and tears. What could a pathetic leech like you possibly own?" Before Mr. Harper could even spit out another insult, his wife suddenly popped up out of nowhere. Her face was still swollen and black and blue from the beating she took at St. Mary's Hospital, looking totally warped under thick layers of cheap foundation. "Oh, I get it now. You found out we are about to strike it rich, so you crawled back to beg for forgiveness, right? Well, let me spell it out for you. Not a chance in hell." I completely tuned out her screeching. My gaze cut right through the noisy crowd, locking dead onto Isabella as she stood behind the second-floor railing. She was staring down at me, wide-eyed. Her expression was this messy cocktail of absolute shock, confusion, and a deep, undeniable panic that she hadn't even realized was showing. "Boss Alex, why not just call security and toss out this stray dog who snuck in for a free buffet?" One of his lackeys sneered. Alex pretentiously adjusted his ridiculous bow tie, making sure his voice boomed across the room. Now, since our dear old buddy Kane just wants to see how the other half lives, I suppose I can throw him a bone. Kane, if you drop to your knees right now in front of everyone, admit you are a filthy thief who stole from the Harpers, and swear to never, ever bother Isabella again, I will personally grant you the highest honor of scrubbing our dirty glasses after the banquet is over. How does that sound? The entire hall erupted into cruel, mocking laughter. Isabella couldn't take it anymore. She rushed down the stairs, planting herself right in front of me. Her eyes were a storm of conflict as she whispered, "Kane, you do not belong here. Alex is rubbing elbows with the big boss's people now. He is going to completely destroy you." I just looked down at her, a chilling, razor-sharp smile slowly creeping up my face. "Oh, President Harper, are you genuinely afraid that I will be the one humiliated? Or are you just terrified that I am going to completely shatter your little perfect life?" Isabella choked, utterly speechless, completely at a loss for words. Suddenly, the massive mahogany doors at the front of the hall swung wide open. The entire room snapped into a dead, suffocating silence. Thomas Blake, the all-powerful president of the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, a ruthless titan who usually strutted around like a king on the financial news networks, was now hunching his back like a lowly, terrified servant, eagerly ushering a group of VIPs into the grand hall. He is here. The big boss is finally here. Alex frantically smoothed out his suit, his eyes practically burning with greedy excitement as he dragged his future father-in-law forward. "Isabella, Mr. Harper, quick, come with me to kiss the boss's ring. This is the very moment that will skyrocket the Harper family to the absolute top." Isabella was practically dragged to the front of the frantic crowd. Thomas Blake scurried up to the microphone, his face locked in a mask of absolute terrified reverence. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I have the supreme honor of welcoming the one and only Mr. Kane from the legendary Thor Group. He has personally returned to Seattle to select our city's next multi-billion-dollar project. Now, please, let us beg him to take the stage." Every single pair of eyes in that room glued themselves to the grand entrance, but no god-tier billionaire stepped through those doors. Thomas frantically scanned the sea of faces, his eyes darting until they finally locked onto a single figure standing quietly in the corner. The very same man the entire room had just been laughing at. The stray dog the Harpers had tried to kick out. The powerful president broke into a desperate jog right through the dead silent crowd, slamming to a hard, terrified stop right in front of me. And then, while hundreds of wealthy elites watched in absolute mind-breaking horror, Thomas Blake bowed down at a perfect 90-degree angle. "Boss, everything is ready for you. Please, sir, the stage is yours to command." At that exact second, it was like someone had hit the mute button on the entire universe. The fancy crystal champagne glass in Alex's hand slipped through his fingers, exploding into a million pieces on the marble floor. The booze completely soaked his $1 million suit, but he didn't even blink. His eyes were bulging out of his skull like a suffocating fish, his bottom lip quivering uncontrollably. Mr. Harper, who had his hand awkwardly stuck out ready to greet the VIP, completely froze in midair like a pathetic, brain-dead statue. And Isabella? It felt like a flashbang had just gone off directly inside her brain. Her entire reality violently shattered into dust in a single heartbeat. Cain, the pathetic loser who washed her dirty laundry every day, the pushover who brewed her hangover soup, the man she spat on daily for being a useless, spineless nobody, was actually the god of thunder himself, the absolute ruler who could crush the heavens with a lazy flick of his wrist. I casually adjusted my cuffs, completely ignoring the sea of petrified, sweating faces around me, and slowly walked up the stage stairs, one by one. Click, clack. Each sharp, echoing footstep against the marble dropped like a sledgehammer directly onto the Harpers' fragile little hearts. I snatched the microphone from Thomas's trembling hands and stepped right into the blazing center of the spotlight. Someone in this room just asked me, what exactly did I come here to reclaim? I slowly swept my eyes across the terrified crowd, my gaze coldly locking onto the pale, sweating faces of the Harper family. The pure ice in my eyes nearly made Mrs. Harper pass out right there on the spot. 3 years ago, I was trusted to protect the Harper family in complete secret. I handed the Harpers countless chances to climb to the very top. But honestly, it seems you guys would rather just live in a fantasy. I slowly pulled a dark, gold-trimmed folder from my coat. It was the exact same investment proposal the Harper family had begged and pulled a million strings just to submit. Alex bragged that he was so absolutely confident about locking down this deal, I said, staring dead at a ghost-white Alex in the crowd. His legs instantly gave out and he hit the floor hard, letting out this pathetic, hoarse gasp. While he couldn't even stammer out a single word in front of the city's elite, I ripped his precious document to shreds without a single ounce of pity. The snow-white scraps fluttered to the ground, looking exactly like a pathetic little funeral offering. From this exact moment on, all Thor-related industrial chains in Seattle are strictly banned from doing any kind of business with the Harpers or Alex's family. Anyone who dares to break this rule will be making a direct enemy out of me. Cain Miller. Mr. Harper started shaking violently, gasping for air, before completely collapsing right into his wife's arms. I set the mic down and turned to leave the stage. Cain, Isabella's voice, completely choked with tears, screamed out across the hall as she shoved her way past the bodyguards. She scrambled to the bottom of the stage steps, staring up at me with these deeply red, swollen eyes. You've been lying to me this whole time, haven't you? You just watched me struggle out there like a total idiot. You watched me beg for the Harper family's business while you stood there like a wall of ice, just waiting for me to fall into the abyss. Did you honestly think that was funny? I stopped dead in my tracks, glaring down at her from the stage. Isabella, 3 years ago, I gave your family a golden ticket to change their entire destiny. My voice dropped low, but it echoed with this bone-chilling intensity. It was an exclusive, one-of-a-kind contract for international trade. If they had just signed it, the Harpers would literally be the #1 family in all of Seattle right now. But the very day I handed that contract to your father, you were out partying for Alex's birthday. You didn't even bother to look at it. Your dad threw it straight into the shredder, calling me a delusional, useless loser. Isabella completely froze up. I could see her mind racing, desperately digging through her memories to find that exact moment. From that day forward, I finally understood. The Harpers never deserved a future like that. I walked right past her, heading straight for the backstage security room. Cain, stop! You saved my life and I cleared your name, but you can't just destroy my family like this. Isabella shrieked like a total maniac behind me. I didn't even bother turning around. I'm not the one destroying the Harpers, I called back. That was your own greed, your blind ignorance, and your sickening arrogance. The second I walked into the surveillance room, Victoria was already waiting for me. Young master, we fully investigated the recent activity in Alex's private accounts. Exactly as you suspected, he had a shady secret meeting with a top-level Harper executive right before the banquet. They were illegally transferring the family's core technology. And on top of that, about that lost contract from 3 years ago, I found hard proof that Mr. Harper didn't just ignore it. He secretly swapped out the paperwork and sold it to your family's biggest rival. He used that cash to quietly wipe out his massive gambling debts. I locked eyes with Mr. Harper's face on the security feed. He looked like a cornered animal, totally consumed by pure desperation and absolute terror. My stare was practically made of ice. Isabella honestly thought her family was just a little mediocre. She had no clue they were actually this rotten to the core. I lit up a cigarette. Watching the thick smoke curl over the glowing monitors, I gave the order. Tell Carter Miller to trigger the legal proceedings right now. I don't just want Alex walking away tonight with a bruised ego. I want him wearing heavy iron shackles for the rest of his miserable life. Understood. On the security feed, the entire banquet hall had completely erupted into chaos. Isabella was just slumped pathetically at the bottom of the stage steps, while Alex was desperately trying to sneak out the back doors. I crushed out my cigarette. This little drama was just getting started. Seattle Military Base. Interrogation Room 3. This used to be the exact spot where Isabella held absolute power. Everyone here knew her as the untouchable Ice Queen. She was supposed to be the literal picture of iron discipline and justice. But today, the air in that interrogation room was suffocatingly heavy. The massive letters painted on the wall, leniency for confession, severity for resistance, glared like a harsh warning under the blinding, shadowless overhead lights. I sat quietly in the shadows just across the metal table, fully draped in a heavy pitch-black cashmere coat. I just lightly tapped my fingers against the freezing metal surface. Across from me, Alex was heavily shackled to a specially designed interrogation chair. His fancy, expensive suit was a wrinkled mess. Thick beads of cold sweat dripped down his forehead, practically forming a puddle right there on the table. Isabella, please help me. This has to be some kind of insane misunderstanding. Kane is just trying to get revenge on me. He's totally faking this evidence. Alex screamed frantically at the heavy one-way mirror. He knew damn well that Isabella was standing right behind that glass watching him. But she completely ignored his pathetic barking. Instead, she just turned to the guy standing next to her, who was calmly organizing his files. Carter Miller. The legal world knew him as the Butcher. He literally never touched a case unless he had a 99% guarantee of destroying you. Once the Butcher got his hands on you, you didn't just lose all your money. You usually walked away with a one-way ticket to a maximum security prison cell. Master, the chain of evidence is complete. Carter's voice was deadpan, completely devoid of emotion, as he slammed a massive file down right in front of Alex. Mr. Alex, based on the mountain of evidence we've just gathered, that car crash 3 days ago. Yeah, it was no accident. Exactly 1 week before the smash-up, you wired $2 million through an offshore account, straight to the wife of the truck driver involved. And meanwhile, your precious Porsche got some incredibly precise brake modifications 3 days before the crash. You made damn sure the dashcam would trigger its victim protection mode right at the exact moment of a high-speed impact. In the eyes of the law, that is textbook insurance fraud and attempted murder. You're lying! Alex's voice cracked, completely hoarse from screaming. His eyes were bloodshot with absolute panic and rage. I was saving Isabella. I'm a hero. That's when I finally spoke up, slowly rising to my feet. I strolled right over to Alex, leaning down to stare dead into his eyes. The same eyes that once brimmed with such gentle tenderness were now just a pathetic, dark abyss, chilling to the bone. Alex. Your absolute biggest mistake was underestimating my patience and severely overestimating your own intelligence. Did you honestly think a heavy rainstorm that night was going to wash away all your dirty little tracks? You had no clue that every single high-definition camera on that stretch of road was upgraded 6 months ago by a tech company owned by the Thor Group. You thought you were so incredibly clever picking a blind spot. But under our infrared lenses, every sneaky move you made was as glaringly obvious as a clown doing a jig in broad daylight. I slowly turned my head toward the one-way mirror. I kept my voice low, but perfectly clear for the people standing behind the glass. Colonel Harper, do you really want to keep watching this? The heavy interrogation room door suddenly swung open. Isabella walked in. Her steps were incredibly heavy, dragging like she was walking barefoot over shattered glass. Clutched in her shaking hand was a freshly printed internal memo. Her face was even paler than the paper she was holding. "Kane," she whispered, looking at me with a wild mix of total confusion and pure terror. "The Defense Department, they just called. They told me that the 5 major cases I solved over the past 3 years, they were only closed because a mysterious intelligence unit was feeding me critical data from the shadows. And since that very unit has just revoked all of their authorizations, every single first and second class honor I got for those cases is now under strict review." She took a ragged, deep breath, her voice shaking out of control. "That intelligence unit, they're your people too, aren't they?" I didn't say a single word. I just stood there, staring right through her with eyes like ice. "Why?" Isabella suddenly snapped, completely breaking down. She slammed her hand hard onto the metal table, screaming right in my face. "You're so incredibly powerful. You could have stood right beside me in the spotlight. We could have fought together. So why? Why pretend to be such a useless, pathetic husband? Why just stand back and watch me like I was some massive joke, letting me calmly accept honors that didn't even belong to me? Are you enjoying this sick game? Watching your own wife dance around in the palm of your hand? Does it give you some twisted sense of accomplishment? Oh, honors that don't belong to you." I let out a harsh, freezing laugh, my gaze turning razor sharp. "Isabella, when you were sipping expensive wine at your little victory banquet, basking in all the glowing praise from your colleagues while locking me outside in the cold, calling me a worthless grocery boy who reeked of cheap cooking oil, saying I'd just embarrass you, did you ever stop to think about how you actually got those achievements?" I sharply pointed my finger right at Alex. My voice dropped another 10 degrees. "When you were sneering at me in the hospital, defending this scumbag who meticulously planned a cold-blooded murder, did you ever once consider that if I hadn't been quietly cleaning up every single one of the Harper family's filthy messes behind your back for the past 3 years, your precious title as the goddess of the military would have been dragged through the mud a long time ago?" Isabella physically staggered back, looking like she was about to collapse. For 3 whole years, she truly believed she was heaven's chosen child. An absolute miracle of the modern military world. She actually thought I wasn't good enough to breathe the same air as her, just because I was too lowly and totally lacked ambition. But the brutal truth was, I had scooped up every ounce of glory and shined it right on her, all while burying myself deep in the shadows. I was her shadow. I was her unbreakable shield. And she had shattered that very shield with her own 2 hands. "Alex, buddy, now it's your turn." I completely ignored Isabella's breakdown, snapping my deadly focus right back to Alex. "Kane, you can't just kill me. This is a modern society. We have laws." Alex shrank back into his chair, sweating pure terror. "Isabella, please save me. I did all of this for you. I just loved you way too much. I just wanted to prove that I'm so much better, so much more useful than Kane." I just smirked and snapped my fingers. On cue, Carter immediately fired up the multimedia projector right there in the interrogation room. But the giant screen didn't show the footage of a car crash. Oh no. It started playing highly classified, secret recordings and videos of Alex's little trips overseas. Right there on video, Alex was happily draped all over a gorgeous foreign woman. He swirled a glass of expensive wine, grinning like an absolute supervillain. That clueless chick from the Harper family, she's nothing but a useful tool. Once I finally crush the Harpers and pry that exclusive tech patent straight out of Mr. Harper's hands and wipe out Cain, that completely worthless son-in-law, Isabella won't have any choice but to bow down to me. Then I'll siphon off all the Harper family's assets and make my grand return home. By the time I'm done, no one will even remember who she is. Alex's arrogant, maniacal laughter echoed loudly from the projector speakers. The entire interrogation room instantly flatlined into a deathly, suffocating silence. Isabella just stood there, staring blankly at the screen like she had been struck by a bolt of pure lightning. The man she had put on a pedestal as her one true love, her so-called soulmate. From the very beginning, he had only ever seen her as a cheap, disposable stepping stone. "This is your precious love," I said, my eyes locking onto Alex's. "Listen closely, Alex, that highly coveted Harper family patent. Mr. Harper already mortgaged it to me for $5 million 3 days ago just to cover his pathetic gambling debts. In other words, that treasure you bled to get, it's currently sitting in my trash can." No, that's impossible. "Mr. Harper promised me," Alex stammered, slumping back in his chair with completely dead, vacant eyes. "Oh, and by the way, there's just one more little detail," I whispered, leaning down so only he could hear. "Did you honestly believe your tens of millions in overseas investments were actually making a profit? Surprise? That financial advisor handling your entire portfolio? Yeah, he works for me now. So, not only are you rotting in a prison cell, but you also owe Thunder God Group $300 million in debt. Even if you die behind bars, your miserable family will never, ever be able to pay off this massive amount. And it's all thanks to your brilliant joint liability guarantee." Hearing that, Alex let out a gut-wrenching, desperate howl before suddenly foaming at the mouth and collapsing into unconsciousness. "Take out the trash," I ordered, waving my hand dismissively. Several waiting bodyguards and inspectors rushed in, dragging Alex out of the interrogation room like a lifeless dog. And just like that, only Isabella and I were left in the cold room. She just stood there in an absolute daze. That pristine military uniform she used to wear with such arrogant pride, it now felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, forcing her head down in absolute shame. "Cain, I was so wrong," she finally sobbed, utterly breaking down. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, making her look completely wretched. "Please, just give me one more chance. I don't care about those stupid honors anymore, and I don't want anything to do with the Harpers either. Can we just remarry? Let's go back to our home. I'll cook for you every single day. I will do whatever it takes to make up for everything I owe you from these past 3 years." I slowly walked right up to her, reaching my hand out as if I was going to gently pat her head, just like the old days. A desperate glimmer of hope flashed in Isabella's tearful eyes. She trembled and squeezed them shut, practically begging for that familiar, loving touch. But instead, my fingers coldly straightened her crooked cauliflower. "Colonel Harper, this uniform really doesn't suit you anymore. You blatantly violated base regulations by illegally pulling surveillance footage to save Alex. I've already handed a formal complaint straight to the Oversight Committee. Isabella, as a citizen, I am simply exercising my legal rights. And as your victim, I demand absolute, uncompromising justice. Starting today, you are no longer a high and mighty base colonel. You're just a disgraced public official under criminal investigation. You're going to destroy my career with your own hands," Isabella screamed, staring at me in total disbelief. "I didn't ruin your career," I replied coldly. "It was you." I turned on my heel and walked toward the door, my black trench coat slicing a sharp, icy arc through the heavy air. "The exact second you chose to save Alex, you killed the very last shred of affection I ever had for you. Now, I'm just taking back everything that was never yours to begin with." "Cain, are you seriously this heartless?" Isabella shrieked hysterically behind me, but I didn't even bother to look back. Heartless? If I were truly heartless, right at the exact moment of that car crash, I would have just taken my hands off the steering wheel and sent both her and Alex straight to God. I stepped out of the suffocating headquarters building, the night air greeting me as crisp and cold as ice water. Victoria was already waiting patiently by the luxury car, immediately handing me the latest intelligence report. Master, Mr. Harper is currently completely surrounded by furious debt collectors at his lavish villa. Every single one of the Harper family's properties, luxury vehicles, and corporate shares were just seized and frozen by the court 10 minutes ago. Also, the corrupted video file of General Harper's final will has been fully restored. I took the glowing tablet, staring at the video of the once kind old man. It was the heartbreaking image of General Harper on his deathbed, exactly 3 years ago. Master, what General Harper wanted to tell you in his final moments might be vastly different from what you always imagined, Victoria murmured softly. I kept my eyes locked on the screen, my fingertips trembling just a fraction. Drive to the Harper family's old mansion, I commanded with ice in my veins. That sprawling estate was where this entire nightmare began, and tonight it's exactly where it's going to end. The Harpers owed me so much more than just 3 years of stolen youth and quiet tolerance. The ugly truth hiding behind their fake gratitude was long overdue for a brutal exposure. The rain in Seattle has never known when to quit. It started pouring last night, and by this evening, it showed absolutely zero signs of stopping. If anything, the storm only grew more violent. Massive raindrops hammered relentlessly against the sleek, metal-clad glass facade of the Escard Group headquarters. It echoed with a dull, dense, cracking boom, like thousands of heavy war drums being furiously beaten all at once. I stood on the penthouse floor, looking out the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, suspended 300 meters above the wet pavement. From the absolute highest point in Seattle, I watched the city's glowing neon lights blur and warp in the driving rain, looking exactly like a violently shattered palette of colors. I used to think this sprawling city was vast enough to swallow up my 3 years of pathetic mediocrity, but now I realized it was tiny. So incredibly small that with just a single snap of my fingers, I could reduce its most powerful families to ash. Master, the grand ceremony begins in exactly 10 minutes. Victoria approached quietly from behind, handing me a steaming, comforting cup of black coffee. The VIP guests downstairs have all arrived. It's the absolute elite of Seattle's political and business worlds. Anyone with a name is here, desperate to witness the coronation of their new king tonight. I took the coffee, feeling its soothing heat radiate through the ceramic cup, grounding me in the moment. But my gaze never left the rain-soaked streets far below, swarming like a pointless ant colony. Is she here? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Victoria hesitated for just a second, and then she nodded. She's right downstairs. The old Harper mansion got forcibly sealed up this afternoon. Mr. Harper was dragged off by investigators for illegal tech patent transfers and running a long-term underground gambling ring. Mrs. Harper threw a massive fit at the front gates, only to be dragged away by a bunch of angry creditors for a little heart-to-heart. As for Isabella, she's been standing out in the freezing rain for 3 whole hours. I just let out a cold, sharp laugh, keeping my mouth shut. But here is the real kicker, Victoria said, lowering her voice to a whisper. She is actually wearing the exact same wedding dress from your marriage 3 years ago. Even if it is totally outdated and completely drenched by the storm, she is just kneeling right there at the company entrance, absolutely refusing to budge, no matter who tries to talk some sense into her. I slowly lifted my coffee cup and took a long, quiet sip. The rich bitterness spread right across my tongue. Coming to beg your ex-husband while wearing your old wedding dress. Wow, Isabella, you have finally stooped to the ultimate cliché. 3 years ago, you looked at that dress like it was a heavy chain holding you back. Now, 3 years later, you are treating it like a magic lifeline to steal back your lost power. Just let her come up, I muttered, setting down my mug. My voice was as icy as the pouring rain hitting the window glass. Tell her to meet me all the way up on the top floor rooftop. I am going to give this pathetic, absurd chapter of my past a proper, final burial right here at the absolute highest point in Seattle. Up on the roof of the skyscraper, the storm winds were absolutely howling when Isabella finally stumbled into my line of sight. Honestly, I almost didn't even recognize her. The once proud, untouchable base colonel, always strutting around in a perfectly tailored military uniform, was completely gone. In her place was just a drenched, broken, and disheveled woman. Her once pristine white wedding dress was utterly soaked through, hanging heavy, grey, and totally lifeless. It dragged along the wet concrete like a tattered funeral shroud. Her messy, soaked hair clung tightly to her pale face in complete disarray. Her delicate features were turning bruised and purple from the freezing wind, and she swayed back and forth on her feet. Right behind her stood a massive crowd of Seattle's richest elites. For my victory celebration, I had deliberately set up a gorgeous, panoramic, transparent viewing platform. Now, countless pairs of eyes, filled with mockery, pity, and sick curiosity, were locked onto this fallen goddess of Seattle's military. Kane, Isabella choked out, her trembling voice violently torn apart by the raging wind. She drunkenly staggered toward me, every single step echoing with a heavy, wet thud as her ruined shoes slapped the flooded ground. I just stood there comfortably under the dry shelter of the eaves, my hands casually clasped behind my back. My crisp black suit remained totally untouched by a single drop of rain, forming a brutally stark contrast to her pathetic, wretched state. Kane, I am begging you, please spare the Harper family. Suddenly, her legs just completely gave out, and she crashed heavily to her knees about 5 meters away from me. The painful crack of her knees slamming into the hard concrete echoed loudly, piercing right through the howling wind. I know I was so wrong. I truly get it now. I never ever should have treated you so horribly before. I never should have taken all of your painful sacrifices for granted. And I never should have abandoned you to die in that terrible car crash. She was crying hysterically, her bitter tears completely blending in with the freezing rain. Just tell me what you want. Anything. As long as you spare my father, as long as you leave the Harpers a way to survive. I will do absolutely anything. She violently snapped her head up, her red eyes burning with a wild, desperate madness. I can quit being a cop right now. I can stay home every single day, exactly like you wanted before. I can even give you children. I swear to God, I will only ever listen to you for the rest of my miserable life. Please, just give me back the sweet Kane I used to know. I just stared down at her, not feeling even a single tiny ripple of emotion in my deadened heart. There was no victorious thrill of revenge. There was absolutely no joy. Just a deep, bone-crushing exhaustion. Isabella, did you seriously misunderstand something here? I took a slow step out from the dry eaves, letting the freezing rain soak into my expensive overcoat as I looked down at her pathetic form. Do you honestly think I am actively destroying the Harper family just because I still hold some petty hatred for you? Because you think I still care about that pathetic betrayal from back then? She instantly froze, staring up at me with a dumb, blank look. You are dead wrong. I slowly crouched down. I stared directly into her wide, pleading eyes. Wiping out the Harper family was strictly a business necessity. You see, the Harpers were nothing but a rotting cancer aggressively feeding on Seattle's entire business chain. Your father's bottomless greed, Alex's pure, unfiltered malice, and your blinding, foolish arrogance. All of that toxic garbage was going to violently blow up in your faces eventually, even without me stepping in. I merely hit the fast-forward button, and as for you, I reached out, the very tip of my finger mockingly flicking the dull, cheap brooch pinned to her chest. Did you seriously think parading around in this old wedding dress was going to magically awaken some long-dead warmth inside me? Isabella, your desperate thirst for power has completely swallowed whatever little dignity you had left, and honestly, that is what I despise the most about you. No, that is not true at all. I love you, Kane. I really, truly love you. She frantically struggled to grab the wet hem of my coat, but I smoothly sidestepped, letting her hands grab empty air. You love me? I stood back up, letting out a dark, mocking chuckle. Isabella, you do not understand the first thing about love. What you actually love is just a convenient shadow, a pathetic ghost that tolerates your abuse unconditionally, waits on you hand and foot, and acts as your emotional punching bag without ever asking for a single thing in return. But the second you finally realized that your little shadow was actually a god sitting on a throne forever beyond your reach, suddenly your so-called love conveniently showed up. That is not love, Isabella. That is just bitter, twisted resentment. It is just your pathetic fear of losing your grip on power. I turned my back on her and walked calmly toward the edge of the rooftop, where a massive LED display was quietly waiting in standby. Young master, the broadcast is ready to go. Victoria appeared silently at my side, holding up a remote. Hit play, I ordered. Since we have finally reached the endgame, there are a few ugly truths that don't need to be kept in the dark anymore. With a click, the giant screen blazed to life. 3 years ago, inside the dusty study of the Harper family's old mansion, it was the very last day of General Harper's life. The video was a bit pixelated, but the old man's voice? Crystal clear. On the screen, General Harper held my hand. His eyes were sharp, completely lucid, not at all like a man losing his mind. Kane, I've wronged you. The general sighed heavily in the recording. I know exactly who you are, the heir to the Thor group. You came to Seattle hiding under a fake name just to dig up the truth about your mother's fatal car crash all those years ago. And it was me, this selfish old man, who used your father's old life debt to chain you to Isabella's side. Isabella absolutely froze. She stared blankly at the screen, choking on her own breath. The general wasn't finished. Isabella. I spoiled that girl rotten. She looks down her nose at everyone, but she's completely blind to people's true intentions. I'm terrified that once I'm in the ground, a snake like Alex will chew her up and spit her out. Kane, I am begging you. Protect her for just 3 years. Consider the Harper family's debt fully paid after 3 years. If she still hasn't learned her lesson by then, and if you still choose to walk away, then that is the Harper family's bitter fate. Don't carry any guilt. It's the bed she made for herself. The video suddenly cut to black. I turned around and glared at Isabella, whose face had gone completely pale. Did you hear that loud and clear? I told her, my voice ice cold. These past 3 years of our so-called marriage, it was nothing but a business transaction. 3 years of swallowing my pride, of guarding the Harper family. That was me paying back your grandfather for saving my dad's life. I saved your neck. I took care of you. I swallowed every ounce of garbage your toxic family threw at me. Not because I was some weak loser, but because I had a contract to finish. So the exact second we walked out of the civil affairs office, the contract died. I don't owe the Harper family a damn thing. And I owe you, Isabella? Absolutely zero emotion. So that's how it really was, Isabella whispered, utterly crushed. The fairy tale marriage of gratitude she loved to brag about? It was just a shield, bought and paid for with her dying grandfather's pride. And while hiding under that shield, she had ruthlessly trampled all over the one man who could have actually saved her life. Kane, I am begging you, please, one last time. She collapsed into a filthy puddle, her expensive wedding dress ruined by the mud. Even if you don't love me, for Grandpa's sake, please don't let my father go to prison. He's too old. He won't survive it. I've already handed over every single file proving your father's embezzlement and his dirty deals with Alex straight to the cops. I stared down at her without an ounce of pity. The law doesn't play favorites, Isabella. Since you used to be a soldier yourself, you should understand this better than I do. Your family stole from Seattle's investors. Now, your father is going to pay his debt to the law. Disgusted, I turned my back on her and started walking toward the rooftop exit. Kane, are you seriously going to ruin us like this? She shrieked behind me, her voice breaking with absolute agony. I stopped in my tracks, but I didn't bother looking back. Isabella, welcome to the real world. When you push a man's dignity past its breaking point, you forfeit your right to mercy. You should be on your knees thanking me that I only took your money and your future. I could have left you completely blind and broken in the dark, just like you did to me after that car crash. I stepped into the elevator. As the metal doors slid shut, I caught one final look at Isabella, sitting all alone in that pathetic wedding dress on a rain-swept rooftop, dwarfed by Seattle's glittering skyline. She looked like a miserable ghost, completely abandoned by time. Down on the first floor, the real party was just getting started. I slipped into sharp, dark gold evening attire and stepped right up to the podium, feeling the heavy gaze of the entire room. Listen up, everyone. As of today, the Harper and Alex families have been wiped off the Seattle map. The Seattle branch of the Thor Group is officially upgrading to the Thor Global Strategic Center. Thunderous applause instantly ripped through the ballroom. I grabbed a glass of champagne from Alfred and stared out at the dark ocean. Seattle's little storm was finally over, but my real war? It was just beginning. I already had declarations of war from massive overseas financial empires sitting right on my desk. The next game was going to be a hell of a lot more brutal than this pathetic Seattle turf war. Power, wealth, absolute dignity. Every single thing they took from me, I snatched back tenfold. And whatever I want next, I'll forge with my own two hands. As for Isabella and those 3 miserable years, choking on the smell of cheap cooking oil and endless humiliation, let them rot deep in the Seattle mud, washed away forever by the rain. I stepped out of the grand hall and Alfred immediately popped open a sleek black umbrella. Young master, our next target is London. The private jet is fully prepped. Let's roll, I said, sliding comfortably into the back of the Rolls-Royce. The tinted windows slowly rolled up. The wipers swung back and forth in a smooth rhythm, scraping the very last drops of rain off the glass.